So do you remember moments when everything felt clear and bright and you felt part of a vast calmness, like seeing the surface of the ocean on a day with few waves, or any beautiful kind of landscape in which you see the big view and experience a feeling of, or it might be something else that stimulated that. But just moments when everything felt clear and bright and you felt very spacious, very calm. So you might just bring one or two instances of those times to mind, if you can remember anything right now, and I hope you can. And now I invite you to think back once again over your precious life experience, which only you know in such detail. And do you remember a time or times when something happened that probably very justifiably caused you to be extremely fearful, angry, or upset? And then suddenly, in the midst of that storm of emotions, there was a stillness, a serenity, an unexpected sense of stopping of all that whirling, turbulent emotion, in which you could rest and feel supported, warm, and held within compassion, even if just for a moment. That experience within the midst of a very upsetting experience of what I call feeling kind of serenity that is surprisingly okay. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that everything is great or wonderful, because there is something upsetting that's going on. And yet, just invite you to try to remember it. And maybe nothing comes to mind, which is fine, but maybe something comes to mind of just those moments of what I call feeling surprisingly okay. And if you can, think of one or two instances in your life of that surprising okayness, that stillness, that relative calm and serenity. I invite you to just kind of mark it with your brain. Just place a little marker, like a bookmarker there. Just mark it. How does it feel in your body to remember it? And just create a little space around it as a reference point for yourself. So it's very important that when I say serenity, that you understand I do not mean feeling passive or resigned or beaten down in the sense of calm, in the sense of just kind of giving up on everything. Although there can be a kind of letting go, which results in relaxation, there can also be a kind of collapsing under, and I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is really a wonderful feeling of liberation, perhaps just 1 second, part of a second, perhaps longer, of lightness and of reaching safe harbor in the storm of one's turbulent experience. Or being able to look around and say, if it's true in the moment, like, wow, I'm still here. All of this stuff is going on, and I can see with my eyes, and I can touch things with my hands, and there's my computer if I have one, and my plants, and my cats, and my cell phone, and the sun is shining, and the earth is turning, or whatever it is that's happening at the moment, to bring ourselves into the present moment, even if only for a second. So that's what I'm talking about when I say surprisingly okay. I like to give Dharma talks titles surprisingly okay. So not blissful. Maybe we're still in shock. Maybe we're miserable, but it's as though we touch a place of clarity and stillness. And then within that, we touch into our spiritual strength. I just invite you to consider that in those moments of relative stillness, of surprising okayness, of calm, even no matter how flickering they are, that we can note that we're actually touching a place of our spiritual strength. We're touching into our capacity for well-being, if only for a moment. And if there can be one moment, consider the possibility, wouldn't it be true, that there could also, we don't know when, It might be soon, might be farther away. There could be 2 moments. And if there could be 2 moments, then there could be 3. So you can see where I'm going with this. I like to work with children. I am a mother of a 25-year-old. And once when my kid was, I think, in 2nd or 3rd grade, I went to pick him up at school. He went through the Oakland Public Schools, K through 12. And I said, "How was your day?" And he said, I had a terrible headache. And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, that you were in pain." And he said, "I went out during recess and I sat under my favorite tree and I meditated." So I was quite surprised, since I myself don't believe in kind of forcing small children to perform. If they want to be quiet, fine, and a lot of times they don't. And that's fine too, because they're learning by playing and they're active. And this was a very active child. So I was really surprised. And he said, "Yeah," he said, "I sat under the tree and I meditated." And I said, "Did it help?" And he said, "A little bit." And then he said, "If it helped a little, it could help a lot." So there we go. Just one little second of surprising okay of that, just touching into that stillness. Sometimes it's called stopping. Just stopping and coming into the present moment. So we can touch into our spiritual strength in this way. And it doesn't need to be when we're formally meditating. It can be in any mindful moment. So in any mindful moment, anytime that you're conscious of your breath, of your body, that your thoughts are occurring, that you have emotions arising, you're aware of sensations that may be pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, neither pleasant nor pleasant. Whenever you are able to experience mindfulness, you can be touching into your spiritual strength. And we know that we can start to heal what has been broken, and that life is unimaginably large in those moments of spiritual strength. If we really listen to that quietness and that quiet voice within, which is the wisdom and the light that each of us carries within us. So this quality of calming, of touching our spiritual strength, of realizing that each one of us has a healing power within ourselves, can be increased, can be cultivated, can be grown in a methodical way through our Buddhist meditation practice or our Dharma meditation practice. And I'm sure through many other spiritual practices as well. I am Buddhist, so I'll be talking about this tradition. Because those moments of calm can be fleeting, and what we want to do is we want to try to grow them and to increase them. There is a story, as I remember it. I haven't actually read this book for a long time, and I Googled it and I couldn't find the exact quote online. So I'm just going to be giving you this story from memory. But I actually do have a pretty good memory, I think. All memory can be somewhat fictitious, but you'll get the point. So this was from a very beloved North American teacher, Pema Chodron, who is a Buddhist nun and has been for a long time, ordained in one of the Tibetan traditions. She's a citizen of the United States. And she wrote about how, as a younger person, before she was a nun, she fell in love and she got married, and she was quite young, I think in around 20, 21, and that marriage ended. And then she fell in love again and she got married again. And then at 8 years later, 8 years into that second marriage, she said that, as I recall, that I think she lived out in the desert in New Mexico, or some very beautiful place. That's what I'm calling of the story. And she said that she had woken up and the sun was rising, and she made herself a cup of her favorite tea, and she went out and was communing with nature, and it was just this glorious, like, beautiful sunrise was coming over the mountains. For those of you who are familiar with New Mexico, if indeed that's where it took place, and I think it did, So just know it's really gorgeous. But it was a very gorgeous area, and she was enjoying her tea, and the sun was coming up, and she said, and then her marital partner, her husband, I think drove up. He'd been somewhere else, and he drove up, or he came up to her, and he said, I've fallen in love with someone else, and I want to divorce. And as I recall from that story, she said that in that moment, she was completely shocked. It was this rug was completely ripped out from underneath her. She experienced what we call groundlessness. It's just like there's no solid ground beneath you. And in that moment of shock, she remembers, this was, I think, before she took up meditation, she remembers that there was this one crystalline moment in which she could see the steam rising from the cup of tea in her hands. She could smell the tea. She could feel the warmth of the mug in her hands. She could see the incredibly beautiful, magnificent sunrise, the mountains, all the colors of the mountains in great detail. And there was just a moment of complete stillness and serenity, that stopping, that vast and spacious, kind of just beautiful, sacred moment. And then she threw the cup of tea at his head. But then she remembered later on that moment when, in the midst of all of that was happening, not only surprisingly okay, beautiful, exquisite, that the larger nature that was actually there going on at the same time as her own story, which of course was affecting her very much. Her life changed in that moment. So therefore, stopping, stilling, calmness, tranquility, calm, abiding. Abiding meaning we are able to be with what is happening, what is arising, with a sense of calm and of groundedness. And so these words, stopping, stilling, calmness, tranquility, calmness, calm, abiding, these are all translations for the Buddhist word shamatha. Shamatha. And I will have a handout, which is optional, for those of you who would like to have this handout later on, that you can get on your way out. And in fact, so I don't forget it, maybe I can ask someone to just take it, Kevin, and tell us where you're going to put it, Kevin. So don't take one if you don't want one, because I'm actually going to talk at the Friday Open Sangha, Open Sitting Group tomorrow night. And if they're leftovers, I'll just take them there.
Donna baskets.
Kevin is going to put them near the Donna basket in that direction. I feel like a flight attendant, so I'm going to gesture over there. So shamatha. As Dharma meditation practitioners, many of you already know this quite well, that in order to be with the intense suffering, the anguish, the agitation, and the traumatic events, not only in our lives, but the lives of our ancestors and our descendants, we need to deliberately, I feel, and with determination, cultivate, practice, and grow shamatha a lot. Shamatha, spacious calmness, calm abiding, protects us from being triggered. It grounds us and makes us stronger and able to include all of life. It paves the way for mindfulness to clarify what it is that we can do and what we cannot do in the moment to be of help and to heal. It helps us to see and accept things as they are, not in order to be resigned to them, but in order to constructively address them, to be active, to be proactive, to ask others for their wisdom, and to consult with others if that's what mindfulness is suggesting would be most helpful for us to do. So I was trained originally in the tradition of Korean Zen Buddhism, and my original teacher, Venerable Samu Sinim, who I think he's now headquartered in Chicago and has temples in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I helped to found that one in the early 80s in Toronto, Canada. That was our original mother temple in Chicago. I think he started one in New York City. And then there's a group in Mexico as well. He used to always say that the Dharma is the practice of self-help and self-reliance. This doesn't mean that we're isolated individuals. It's kind of the opposite, actually, in this tradition, that each of us heals ourselves to the extent that we can, and we practice to become whole people. We practice to become more joyful, more helpful, to know our own purpose and to know ourselves more deeply so that we can better contribute to community. We can better contribute to the communities of our spiritual communities, our workplace communities, our geographical communities, if we live in Oakland or Berkeley or San Francisco or San Leandro, wherever we live, we have neighbors, we have community there. Our families and extended families, we might have activist communities that are that we meet with person to person or online. There's so much organizing that's going on now in cyberspace and through social media. We're all part of all of these communities. So the purpose of going in this direction of wisdom and compassion as best each of us can, it has the dual purpose in which we help ourselves and we also help others. And those two are actually one and the same. So if we're helping others and we're not helping ourselves, then that's not a complete equation. We always are doing it 360 degrees. And sometimes the emphasis might be on more one and the other. So speaking as a mother, I know there are times when sacrifices need to be made. And then hopefully there will be a time to balance. So shamatha, or meditative calmness, or practices include the Brahma Viharas. Those are the 4 divine abodes. They're also called the 4 immeasurables. And these are very popular practices here at East Bay Meditation Center and also at many other places. They're popular practices because they work so well for so many people, myself included. So if I may ask, how many of you have a practice of loving kindness or metta meditation? Yeah, just fling up your hands. Look around. Here, we got metta friends here. Okay, thank you. Very, very popular practice. Jack Kornfield, one of the founding teachers at Spirit Rock Meditation Center, has said that in his point of view, metta, M-E-T-T-A, often translated as loving kindness, also as goodwill, universal friendship, meditation practice. He says it's the closest thing he knows to a one-size-fits-all practice. So that means that it's actually not for everyone, because probably nothing is, but it's really useful for many, many people, and it's a deep, deep practice. So the 4 Brahma Viharas, the 4 divine abodes, these 4 meditation techniques, which can help lead to the establishment of meditative calmness or shamatha, are metta. Also Maitri. So these are the 2 of the ancient Buddhist languages, Sanskrit and Pali, metta and Maitri. And then compassion practice. That's karuna. Karuna, compassion, great compassion. Maha karuna. Maha means great or big. Maha karuna, big, great compassion. And then there's empathetic joy, mudita. And mudita is a practice in which we recognize, we try to become sensitive when other people are happy and joyful. And then we do a practice of empathizing with their joy. And this is easy when what makes them joyful is what makes us joyful. Mm-hmm. Now, the deep end of the pool and the advanced level of mudita is when it's something that really bores us or that we actively dislike. And again, I'm reminiscing about my original teacher who was really a great teacher. And he was, I usually resided in our Ann Arbor, Michigan temple, and I'd go back and forth out to do some work up in Toronto occasionally, but mostly was in Ann Arbor. And he mostly lived up in Toronto. And so that temple was at the time, in a townhouse, in a quiet residential area in Toronto, except that there was apparently one day where there was some giant sports event going on that everyone was very invested in. I guess the equivalent would be kind of some really hotly contested Super Bowl or something like that here, just giant sports event. And so all the neighbors had all of their windows up and they were screaming and yelling and cheering or crying, whatever the way the team was going. They were totally into it and it was extremely loud. And so as he was telling us about this later on, he said it was really noisy, but I had to sympathize with their joy. So that's mudita. That's mudita. Or if we see, like a little child, again, I've spent a lot of time with children, and sometimes we take those toddlers down the street and they don't discriminate about things at that age. So they might see a smashed bottle cap or some really, really dirty, ugly piece of plastic thrown down. And to their eye, it will look like a great treasure and they'll just leap upon it with wonderful glee. So depending what it is, you might want to take it away from them. But still, we're practicing mudita. So you can see from these examples that the Brahma-viharas not only can help lead us to more serenity, to more calming of the mind, they also enlarge us. They help us expand our hearts and our experience beyond what our own preferences and tastes are. They help us grow larger in a very natural way, because we shouldn't force anything. We shouldn't, for instance, take an example of something that we really truly despise and think is very harmful, and someone's taking joy in it, and we think, well, I've got to do mudita. No, it doesn't work like that. We just allow it to grow naturally. It's called cultivation. So when we cultivate our gardens, we're doing with patience, and we're just letting things grow, and we have an attentive eye, but we're not overwatering, and there's a kind of a balance and a patience there that we can, and a wisdom that's part of cultivation. So the practices of the Brahma-viharas lead to the cultivation of shamatha, or meditative calmness. They're very popular practices, as I said, in East Bay Meditation Center, beyond, and also in this People of Color Sangha for very good reason. And what can be helpful for us to know is that in the Dharma teachings, that, and again on the handout, if you care to get one, it shows that there are two major branches of meditative cultivation: shamatha and vipassana, or vipassana, insight. So calming, calm abiding, one branch, and insight arising. But they aren't separate. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, they they're actually interwoven. Because calm abiding, or shamatha, leads to insight, or vipassana, and insight leads to calm abiding, and they nourish one another greatly. And then when we have established both shamatha and vipassana, calm abiding and the insight is arising. So in other words, we learn to take care of ourselves. We don't want to shut ourselves off from the world. And yet if we just willfully, or perhaps it's beyond our control, but whatever that we can take care of ourselves, be very careful as to what you expose your good heart to. There's so much suffering, and so that is actually endless. It's what's seen in the world. So we want to nourish those qualities of that which is beautiful, and kindness, We want to notice what's good. We want to notice what's joyful, because those things are happening as well. So we have shamatha, we have vipassana. And then it is insight or vipassana, eventually seeing the nature of phenomena that has the potential to liberate us or free us from clinging and craving, sometimes called greed, to free us from aversion, which hardens into hatred, and to liberate us from delusion or ignorance, which simply means we don't see things clearly as they are. We don't understand accurately the reality at hand. So we're building up our spiritual strength as people of color and as a beloved community here. And we're developing shamatha power, happiness, contentment, and well-being through our meditation. Learning to be with the breath, with our sacred bodies, and with each other in a beloved community of kindness, compassion, and wisdom, imperfect as it is, because it's always a work in progress here at East Bay Meditation Center. Because as author and activist Andrew Boyd, so this is a quote that's going around Facebook, has said, and I did go back to the source, so it is on his website. He said that compassion hurts. When you feel connected to everything, you also feel responsible for everything. You cannot turn away. You must either learn to carry the universe or be crushed by it. You must grow strong enough to love the world, yet empty enough to sit down at the same table with its worst horrors. So you must go strong enough to love the world. Shamatha helps us to grow strong enough to love the world. And so this is a map for a practice that I hope you'll carry home with you. Shamatha, vipassana, calm abiding, insight arising, and insight leading to wisdom and to liberation. And as insight arises, we gradually grow wiser, kinder, more caring, more healed, more mindful, and also more passionately and more fully alive. This very moment will never come again. It will never, ever come again. The way in which we're together right now in community will never come again. Swiftly passing, swiftly passing. So let's enjoy our time together and hopefully benefit from our practice together as a very precious Sangha. So thank you for your kind attention, and we have 10 minutes since we've already heard the wonderful teachings on Dana or generous giving for your insights and any questions you may have. And once again, there is a handout with a little bit more kind of technical information from the Princeton Dictionary of Buddhism, which I'm very keen on, and which I brought with me. So you're free to examine it at the end of the group. And Kevin has the handheld button.
Mushim, thank you. Thank you very much for giving your voice tonight. And I was really inspired by your talk. I had a question. You made a reference to Jack Kornfield kind of alluding that there isn't like a one size fits all for just about anything, right? I mean,
that's what I said.
Well, okay. But it's just
but the thing he said was it's the closest we can get.
It's the closest.
He did not say it's a one size.
Right. So I just got a thought that I wanted to raise, and it's a question. And one of the undercurrents that I was kind of feeling as you went through the talk with this sense of freedom. And as I progress on the path of insight, freedom becomes more of a tangible, so to speak, goal or outcome. But the question I had is freedom one size fits all? The reason I asked is because of the nature of impermanence. And the question began with the thought of, does the definition of freedom change depending on conditions? Is it always one thing?
In this system, no. And you may have heard the quote, Thomas, that just as the great oceans all have one taste, and that is the taste of salt, the awakening that can result from this path, these practices, and other paths as well. But it's considered that that awakening, that liberation, only has one taste, and that's the taste of freedom. And by freedom, we mean freedom from greed, craving, and clinging, that from the roots of hatred and aversion, so that they can never arise again, and also freedom from delusion and ignorance.
So anything below the freedom, anything below freedom from craving, delusion, and hatred isn't freedom.
Nope. But we can get a little flashy. It's like if it's steady state or if you get a little flash.
I was just saying, just to kind of establish the right kind of ideal.
Yeah, that's like the total idea.
Okay.
It's like it's totally gone, and we're never even going to get irritated if someone like steps on our foot or anything.
Thank you very much.
But I'm not there.
I'm not.
Thank you, Mushim. I always enjoy this. I just had a quick question about, you mentioned empathetic joy, and then the story about the guy in Toronto, I think, about the game that he had said he had sympathy. Is there a distinct
empathy?
Oh, okay, so is there a distinction? I was going to ask if there's sympathy and empathy in Buddhist.
Sometimes mudita, that's a good question, is called sympathetic joy. And I think more often now it's called empathetic joy, but it really means the same thing. It means that we are willing to extend our feelings to resonate with the feelings of other people who may have different feelings that we do, and yet, or who may have different causes. And yet, because we know how it feels to be joyful and how energizing and helpful that can be, then if someone else is joyful, we're like, yippee, good on you. So that kind of, right?
Yes. Okay, thanks. So, yeah, sympathy, I think when we talk about someone who sympathizes, I think of like they pity you versus they feel with you. You know?
Yes, I do know. And that's what I think of too. It's like, oh, I'm so sympathetic. So, but that can come across as pretty condescending or not, depending. Whereas empathy means, yeah, they're resonating with you. Thank you.
Hi. Just had a thought. Are all the Brahma Viharas ways of expressing a kind of we mentality of really not just kind of having less discernment about me versus someone else, but that we're all in this together?
That's a really interesting way of putting it. I wouldn't have thought of it, and I absolutely agree. In fact, I don't know, he must be in the air. Again, my original teacher, Venerable Samusinim, used to have this saying, and he would say, we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. So in this Dharmic point of view, absolutely. It's a we mentality, because formally in these teachings, there actually is no such thing as an isolated or separate I. There just isn't. It's completely impossible. It doesn't mean that we don't have a name or a social security number or, some kind of continuity. And remember when we were little kids and things like that, that's all conventionally true. What it means, and I hope no one would dispute this, is that we don't exist in a vacuum. We're here because of our ancestors. We're here because we're able to breathe the air, and we've had food, and we've had clean enough water, and all these causes and conditions have come together to produce our life in this present moment. Some of us may have children, both biological and spiritual. And so we're all tied to everything. I mean, you wouldn't be here except that you ate breakfast or lunch or dinner when you were 3 years old. Is that factually true? I'm asking you.
Oh, yeah.
So whatever you had, I don't know what the heck it was. Say it was, your bologna sandwich or something like that. That actually is part of the causes of conditions that the greater we, and though that food came from somewhere and came out of life, right? So so actually that's just one element of what has brought your marvelous presence to us now. So yes, the Brahma Viharas are called the four immeasurables because we cannot measure them. They're infinite compassionate. They're unconditional loving kindness, and which is a pretty tall order, folks, when we think about it. Again, it's easy to love the people and things we feel that are lovable. Much harder, and I'm not talking about love in the sense of like, oh, I love you, I love you. I'm talking about in the sense of, yes, I respect your place in the web of life. I respect that you have feelings. I respect that your life is valuable because it's part of life of people and things that we don't find lovable. However, I have to say we do have kind of a past because I heard a great Dharma talk on metta by Tanasaru Bhikkhu, whom I'm hopefully going to go visit in October with my friend Lynn Fine. And he is a really noted Buddhist monk, scholar, and author who has a little monastery down in Southern California. And he gave a teaching on metta in which he said that traditionally that we need to include, for instance, venomous snakes and scorpions and things like that when we include goodwill for all beings. And he said, but we can also say, may you be happy, may you be peaceful, and may you go far, far. So we can let that pressure off ourselves. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Got a couple more minutes. Is there any insight? Any comments or insights on shamatha, calm, abiding?
Everybody's pointing at
Thank you so much, Mushim. I was wondering where concentration fits in with calm and serenity.
You can get a handout. It's all covered here, Sierra. All right, here we go. It says there are two major branches of Buddhist meditative cultivation. That cultivation is called bhavana. And then, so one branch is shamatha, calm, abiding, or stopping, and the other is vipassana, insight. So my talk was more on shamatha. And so that is also defined as serenity, tranquility, mental peace and stability generated through meditative concentration or samadhi. So to experience shamatha, we need to have meditative concentration, which makes sense, right? Yeah, when we're in that concentrated state, we're not like concentrating like, that kind of, it's too tense, right? But it's more open, it's more relaxed. Then we have meditative concentration or samadhi, in which often people will report, I will report, and I hope you will report that there's often things become quite luminous. There's just a stillness and it's very filled with light. Kind of a beautiful experience, right? Samadhi. Thank you. So we'll end our evening here together with great thanks for all of you for your practice. And as is traditional, I'll invite you to end this time together by doing what's called dedicating the merit. So if there has been any goodness, and I'm sure there has been, through any thought or word or deed, that has been generated by anyone here, and I feel there is a lot. We want to hold up, we want to raise up that great mountain of goodness that we've generated through the goodness of our hearts, the kindness with which we treated ourselves and others this evening. And because we don't want to cling or hold on to anything, we know that goodness we've generated, but it doesn't belong to us. We instantly offer it up. We give it away with open hearts, with open hands, for the well-being, for the peace, for the happiness, and for the sustenance and the nourishment of all the beings in the world. And with open hearts, we dedicate it particularly to anyone who may be in pain, who may be suffering from oppression, who may be suffering any kind of anxiety or depression. In this very moment, we offer it up to all of these beings, and knowing that we've done a good thing, even in that very offering and in that open-hearted goodness, we can now turn to ourselves and to one another, if you like, placing the palms of the hands together, and a deep bow of gratitude and respect.